Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Change Management, Breaking Through the Pandemic Fog. We are so pleased to have Tom and Evie Caprell of Breakthrough Results with us today. My name is Emily Lee, and I'm the Program and Partner Relations Coordinator with IMEC. As you know, IMEC is a team of industry improvement specialists with the goal of helping Illinois manufacturers thrive both through and beyond this time of uncertainty. Please remember to visit the Illinois Manufacturing Helpline to submit any questions you have, and you'll receive a direct response from our experts. With that, we will get started in just a few moments, but I have a few items to cover. Please visit the chat window in a few minutes, and I will have a copy of the presentation if you'd like to download the handouts. We do ask that you keep your phones and microphones on mute for the webinar as we are recording today's session. We appreciate your help to reduce noise and background feedback. We will share a download copy of the webinar later on today so you can re-listen or share with colleagues. As any questions arise for you during the presentation today, please go ahead and submit your questions via the chat window. I will present these questions at the end of today's session. If any of these questions need a longer answer or link to additional resources, Tom and Evie can respond to those in written form, and we'll share those in an email again this afternoon. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. Please join me in welcoming Tom and Evie of Breakthrough Results.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. On behalf of Tom and myself, we just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today and share some of our thoughts and insights to help us during this crazy time. And first, we do say, and we hope that you and yours are safe and healthy throughout the call. So today, what we're going to do is really give you some concrete tools you can use to assess your situation and actually how to execute a plan for concrete action. But first, just a few seconds on both Tom and myself.
Thanks, Evie. Once again, I want to second the thank you to IMEC for being able to work with you again and to meet all of you despite the circumstances. Just to give you a little bit of quick background, Evie and I have spent the first half of our career starting, growing, selling, sometimes failing at a multitude of businesses. And that was a great opportunity for us to create experimentation in the business world so that we could learn what it was like to be leaders of organization as we moved along. So that moved into the second half of our career.
And so what we did in our second half really was we actually licensed a methodology, and we've actually tweaked that a little bit from our experience of working with businesses and manufacturers. So currently what we do business advising, we do roundtable groups, we also do executive coaching, and of course, we do presentations. So we're glad to be here today. So our intentions for today are really to help you understand the scope of the changes we are facing and how to manage those changes. We really need to do that in order to thrive in the months and years ahead. So we have some specific techniques and tools that we're going to share with you today so that you can learn from that and hopefully gain some new knowledge. The first thing I'd like to also mention here is how you can listen today. Now, what do I mean by that? So, there are different ways for us to listen. And we're all subject matter experts. You guys are great at what you do. You have experience in education and understand exactly what you do. What we're asking you to do today is take that brain trust you have and actually just move it to the side a little bit. So that gives us an opening for new possibilities, new ways of hearing about things, new ways of listening, new ways of looking at how something could be handled differently. And because we're in such these difficult and different times, we're going to ask you to kind of set everything kind of to the side just a little bit. So that's what we're going to ask you to do today for listening.
And you may have heard of some of these tools already and maybe have even used some of these tools. But once again, we've combined them in a way that we think are unique and new. And we'd invite you to take a look at that from a different and a new perspective, as Evie said.
So we've experienced with many of our businesses what we've put together is called the COVID business experience phases. So it all started probably in February where we were looking at what is happening. What is happening to our world? What is happening to our business? What is happening to me personally? What is happening with my health, others' health? And so we've gone through so many changes from our regular existence, and we're all just trying to absorb and attempt to process really what was happening, which was hard to deal with. Then I think we've moved into we're calling limp along. So the changes have become less frequent. So when we first started working with people, and we started meeting with people more and more frequently because they're so just didn't know what to do, where to turn, what we really did was we found that the changes were becoming less frequent. They really had started to become a little more acclimated, understand what's happening. They could focus a little bit more on the operation of the business, and they were existing kind of the best that we all could. The fourth phase we're calling wake up. This isn't going to go back, and it's not going to go back to anything that we know anytime soon. So there's a new guidance, a new direction that we have to put into place to potentially operate in this new normal. The first place most companies went to was to fix the obvious problems that the shutdown had exposed. Now, for example, that would be from work from home. Some people couldn't work from home. Other people had no idea how to work from home. I remember a story where one of our clients literally had a folding chair in his spare room with his laptop on his lap. So there's a lot of things that we had these problems we just didn't know how to work on and what they came up. And lack of technology was also another issue. So here we are now, engaging in the new reality. And this is what we're going to present today, tools to create your plan for the new reality.
So where are we today? To get an idea of how we measure the new reality, we wanted to illustrate Bain Consulting's situational threat report. Many of you, some of you may be familiar with it. This is a tool that we're using with our groups on a regular basis. As you may or may not know, Bain is a global management consulting firm, one of the most well-respected. And as of February 25th, Bain raised their threat condition to level 5. So if you look at level 4 and say, okay, this was sustained transmission, right? There's daily situational monitoring. So when it went to sustained transmission, likely in multiple nations, those first level contingencies put into place, and that really was the what is happening stage, right? How do we move forward? And as they marched along in mid-April, they moved up to threat level 6, and for the last month, we've really been at threat level 7. So what Bain is suggesting that we should have some second level contingencies already in place, which many organizations may, salary reductions, layoffs, furloughs. So based on these factors and other factors, we want to suggest a new way to operate in the world as we move along.
So I love this slide. I'm going to talk with you a little about something that maybe you haven't thought about. We have this information that we've taken from William Bridges' book called Transitions. And on the left side, you'll see behaviors. And on the bottom axis, you'll see time. And this is a demonstration on how you can understand what is happening with your people, with you, and with your companies. The first piece is ending. So something ends, and it creates all of this different emotion, confusion, reservation, frustration, denial. It also, of course, creates anxiety. And so what has happened, what ended actually was our way of life. What ended is how many of us did business. What ended is how we relate to people. And so what everybody thinks is that something new begins, like there's a new business or a new factor. But what actually happens is something ends first. And these old behaviors tend to leak over into a new part, what we're calling the transition. The transition zone or the neutral zone is actually where we want behaviors to move into. Most people, I want to tell you something. We had our meeting this morning with our sales group, one of our discovery groups. And what ended for them was a way to actually conduct sales. They would go out to networking organizations and have lunches and go out for a drink or beverage. And now they can't do that anymore. So what ended was how they actually were able to conduct business. So what's really true, that it ended, but now they are in the transition zone. And the transition zone or the neutral zone sometimes is really hard because you feel like you're not quite sure what to do. You're not sure what's going to happen. The next steps are not clear. And so with the transition zone, what we want to do is bring in new behaviors so that we can create something new, a new beginning. So with the new beginning and within those behaviors, new things can happen, new opportunities, new business lines, things that really could make a difference and help people in the whole process of managing change. Here's your goal. Here's what I suggest you need to do is to lengthen, or excuse me, squish that transition zone so that the ending and the new beginning goes quicker and faster. You'll have more production. You'll have faster results. People will be able to make decisions quicker. So we wanted to describe this first so that you can actually see what's happening with people's behavior. You probably saw people early on kind of reverting back to the old way they used to do things and how they used to say things. And now hopefully that you'll been able to see how what's happening with them and you perhaps going through that transition zone, that neutral zone, and starting with a new beginning.
Change is external. So the world changed, and that's the ending that Evie is describing. Transition during that change is internal. So if we're not aware that we have to make this transition to new behaviors, to create this new reality that we're describing, then all of our work on the business model canvas or in Porter's 5 forces and the other tools that we're going to describe to you would be wasted without keeping and understanding how it is that I tighten that transition zone so that it happens over a shorter period of time to create higher energy, accomplishment, and commitment into this new plan. So that's the linkage to strategy, right? So that from transitions to strategy is an important consideration. So we've laid the groundwork for understanding the environment you'll be making changes in, but it's always take into consideration the ecosystem you are operating in as the context for building strategy. So you're going to be creating change. Hence, strategy creates change, hence change management. It's about deciding the future you want and defining how to get there. So we're offering this definition of strategy because strategy plays a role in change management. And we will focus on change management, but we need to touch on strategy as a part of a cohesive process. So that's why we quote McKeon here. So as we move along, goals define why we do what we do on that left column. Strategy defines what and where we do it, and then operations defined how we do it. So if your goals have changed, so if your business has become so impacted or people's mindset have become so impacted that they want to change their goals, their values have said, we want to run a socially responsible business now, then all of this is in the win. However, if your goals are the same, example, be a leader in a particular category of an industry, the world has changed, but your strategy and ops have to change. So as a strategist, you define the goal and then determine what resources you need and how to use those resources. So the issue is so many things have been coming at people so quickly and in so many fronts. The real question that we've run into with most of our clients is, how do I reduce the complexity of the number of observations I have to make to be able to make quicker, easier decisions? So we've put together a set of tools that are commonly available in the world that have created the opportunity for clients to be able to provide a clear picture about where it is that they want to go. So it's a very busy slide. There's a lot there. I'm not asking you to, we're not going to go through all of those on this slide, but just be aware that the three tools we're talking about are the business model canvas, a pretty standard SWOT analysis, and Porter's 5 Forces. Those are the only documents we have in support of creating a clear business model canvas, which will be a snapshot of where you're at and a potential snapshot of where you want to be, and then action items which need to be taken to create that envisioned future. All right, so the business model canvas. Let's talk about how the business model canvas is laid out and how to approach filling it in. Once again, this is just a high-level overview so that you can see this. These tools will be available for you to use with the questions you need to ask to fill in these boxes. But just to give you a sense of this, the business model canvas sitting here by itself empty looks like one of those tools that's like, okay, how do I do this? Well, actually, we start with value proposition. A critical component of any business is their value proposition. Once that value proposition is in place, certainly actually you start with your values and your strategy at the top here. That leads to a value proposition. We then move over to this right side of the document, which we call the customer and revenue side of it. Okay, so it's grouped into value proposition, customer and income, as well as operations and costs. So now we'd move over to customer segments, describe what those are, the type of relationships we want to have with our customers, the channels we may use to talk to them on, and then finish with what the revenue streams might look like. We then jump over to who are our key partners in this environment, what type of activities we would need to take on, what are our resources, and what are those particular cost structures. So you can see how it's laid out and how you would move through the document. We've got specific examples. You don't have to worry about that at the moment. So as we look at it, talk about a busy slide, but this captures the state of an organization at one moment in time. And those are the questions that you would need to ask yourself that will be available with links through IMEC after this presentation, so that you can ask yourself to fill in this slide. So in customer segments, the question might be, it defines, are we a mass market? Are we a niche market? Are we segmented? Or do we diversified? And once you answer those questions, you get an example of a business model canvas, something like this. So this is an example of a client of ours who we've been using the business model canvas with, and their purpose is to enhance the happiness of both people and pets. So if we start in the business, in the value proposition, you can read that yourself. It's longish. I don't need to replay it for you. Secondly, we then jump over to the customer segment. So they've suggested that they have two segments. Niche market for consumers, so they sell directly to some consumers, but a very segmented arena for their online distributors, their brick and mortar distributors, and some direct to smaller stores. So those are three very specific segments. So now you can imagine with those types of segments, there's some significant work to be done in the relationship side. So you can see this is in black. They haven't filled this, we haven't filled this out yet because there are many questions to answer. Some of these were dedicated personal assistants or self-service. So you need to determine what your relationship is. They also haven't really determined the complete awareness around the channels that they're in. And the final piece is that they do sell at list price to one segment, and then the other piece is that it's definitely customer segment dependent. So now let's move over to, yes.
Oh, I want to step in just real quick. Sorry, I just want to tell people that this is actually a manufacturer as well. So this is a real live example of how the business model canvas would work, but also this is actually like a real live manufacturer.
Thank you. I appreciate you putting that in. Absolutely. So in key partners, their third-party logistics operation is a key partner. Their offshore manufacturers are key partners. Their offshore agents are key partners. The design studio that helps them are key partners. Those are just a few of them. The activities that they determine are key is to create and innovate niche functional products. So product development is a key activity for them. New products. They need to manage their supply chain, and who doesn't these days? First with all of the tariffs that were associated with it, now with the COVID disruption, inventory management is more important than ever. Acquisition of distressed bolt-on is a potential activity. So now we look at this and say, let's look at the creation of organizations who are never going to come out of the limping along state and never really get reorganized. That's a possible opportunity for acquisition. So now the key resources are certainly their warehousing, their brand, and their cash flow. And the last piece is that they have cost structure that's cost driven, of course. So now this is a snapshot of their current organization on May 14th of 2020, because we just did this one last week. All right, so that's what we want to get people to, is a current snapshot. So when you see the color as it's relevant to the business model canvas, current state is in green. We're now going to go through the Porter's 5 forces, as well as the SWOT analysis, which will increase the items inside the business model canvas. Those will be in blue for opportunities, and weaknesses and threats will be in red. So there's the relevance to it. You can take a look at this as we move forward. So the first tool that we use is Porter's 5 forces to describe the environment or ecosystem that the organization is operating inside of. And that is effectively changed in ways that in a matter of 2 months that none of us could foresee. So this 5 Porter's perspective is named after Michael Porter of Harvard University. And although the framework was first published in 1979, we've been using this over the last 20 years extremely effectively for many of our clients. So what it helps you do is to take a look at what Porter suggests are the 5 components of competitive environments. So sometimes your buyers have, on the right side, sometimes your buyers have more power than you do. And you have to take that into consideration. That could be a weakness or a threat. Sometimes there are threats of substitution and knockoff. For this particular client that we're talking about, there has been a significant amount of knockoffs coming from China that have threatened the brand that they currently have. They have to look at their supplier power. The individuals and organizations that are providing you with supplies might have more negotiating power than you. And then, of course, the threat of new entry. We are working with a services organization that has seemed to have had 60 or more competitors for the last 20 years, no matter what happens. So you talk about threats of new entry all the time. And then, of course, competitive rivalry. There might be too many competitors. You might have a commoditized product, low switching costs. All of those combine to create a picture for yourself. So we use Porter's 5 forces, along with us that then drops into a SWOT analysis. So if you look at the SWOT analysis based on this current organization, we're gonna pop back and forth between these two, because this is now the business model canvas after we've exercised the Porter's 5 forces and the SWOT analysis against their original document. So you can see in here there's some blue items: online sales and marketing expertise. They need some guerrilla marketing experts. So what they did was they took a look at this and said, is there some opportunities for some brand building to hire an outside marketing company? So they they put it into their business model canvas and said, yes, we need to take a look at that. Another key activity, continuing sales progress, reporting, feedback, and communications. So, one of their weakness in sales was that their marketing and sales are hampered due to lack of bandwidth internally. So they needed to put that in to make sure that they took care of their organization and add individuals to help with that. They found that they've had some teamwork and collaboration issues, and they haven't supported their installed base as effectively as they could. So those are all components that come out of this. If you look at this, threats, made in China used to be an advantage. Is it possible that that becomes a threat now? Amazon is certainly a threat if you compete at what they want to do. And that came out of the Porter's Five Forces. Amazon, although they are someone who is a wholesaler to their clients, they could actually be a threat to them as well. So it's an interesting set of combinations to get those things put into place. So other opportunities, can they, steal from competitors is the wrong term, but are their competitors going to be able to service their organization, their installed base as effectively as possible? So what we've done is taken these two tools and dropped it into this business model canvas. So if you look at the components of the business model canvas now, we have a future business model canvas that compares to the current business model canvas. So from that, we're going to need to create new opportunities for execution out of this. So we didn't take everything out of the SWOT analysis and put it right into the business model canvas. They said, you know what? We need to figure out, are we a real-time market or price-adjusted market revenue? Are we cost-driven or value-driven? I mean, these are huge issues, right? That they didn't necessarily have to consider in the beginning of this process, but because of these changes over the last 2 months, they've had to. So you can see that this is a 2-hour or a 3-hour or a 4-hour process to put something together that gives you an appropriate business model canvas that you can then create action items off of. So, what you need to do is to be able to prioritize and execute these items. And so really, which tool will you use? We're pretty tool agnostic. We've created our own tool in the Breakthrough Leadership System as a tool to execute items. But if you're a manufacturing environment, I'm sure that many of you have used all of these lean execution tools, a simple Gantt chart, something as complex but as effective as Baldrige execution tools as well. So it's imperative that you just don't leave it on your business model canvas, that you actually put it into a tool that you can then follow up on an individual basis. So that's the process that we're describing, and that's where we suggest that you can use to put together an iterative process that's more easily used during this time of increasing change and difficulty.
Well, Tom, I think that's really critical, you say, around not letting the business model canvas just sit on a desk or a shelf. Is sometimes when we work on these types of things, that's where they go. And what we found and what we work on is we really try to align with the new goals or the new objectives, all of the tactics that need to take place. Sometimes people get busy and they're not aligning to where the strategy is to go to make those changes, to really bring it into focus on how we should move forward. I think that's really critical, and how we can make sure that the tactics, again, line up with where we want to go within the business model canvas based on the different categories of Porter's and also the SWOT. So, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Nope.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we just wanted to tell you that strategy never stops, of course, because the environment that you're in never stops changing. It's always dynamic. It's sort of seeking an equilibrium that never ends. And COVID, frankly, is just a huge shock. So it'll take longer to find out that what that equilibrium really is. The coronavirus is more like an earthquake with aftershocks that will permanently reshape the world. When we really look at that, that's really what's happening. It's reshaping our world. And if we're lucky, the world will pass the peak virus and within the next 6 months. But the economy and governments and social institutions will take years to recover, frankly, even in the best case scenario in the materials we've been reading. Indeed, rather than even speak of a recovery, which really implies a return to how things were, it really would be wise to project what new direction civilization will take. That too will be a bumpy ride, and we're all in it together. However, the next 3 to 5 years will remind us that COVID-19 was the lightning before the thunder. So with that, we're going to turn it back to Emily to see if you have any additional questions or if there's anything else we can answer for you.
Sure. Just a quick reminder, if anybody does have any questions, if they'd like some clarification or just more insight, please go ahead and submit those by the chat window. We do have a few that have come in. So first off, just a general question, do you see people having more threats and weaknesses when they're doing a SWOT, or opportunities and strengths?
Evie, I'll take a crack at this one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, Emily. The issue that we're finding is that originally in the what is happening and the limp along, there was just an extraordinary number of threats and weaknesses that were uncovered in such a rapid period of time, and I'm not sure that they were particularly surprising for the individuals. They just didn't expect them to all roll out within a matter of weeks. And what we've seen over the recovery stage, if that's the right term for it by any means, and this next stage of planning for the future, there's been much more opportunistic and strength conversation. So it's a little bit cyclical based on what's been occurring. So that's the best that I could say. And in the past, before COVID, let's say, absolutely weakness and threats. People will immediately go to weaknesses and threats, and really aren't as effective at creating the strengths and opportunities as they need to.
Excellent. Another question, will you be pivoting your business to help train business owners to work with a remote workforce?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that question. Could you say it again?
Yes. Will you be pivoting your business to help train business owners to work with a remote workforce?
We actually are doing that now. We have with our organizations that we work with, we are helping them pivot to more virtual, everything from offering them different opportunities, understandings of technology. We work with a lot of technology companies, and so we do help them pivot into that reality. I don't think it's going to go away, frankly. I think that even if we get to see each other closer than 6 feet apart, I really don't think virtual is going to go away. I think that a lot of companies we've seen actually are thinking, wow, I didn't know that my company could work remotely. And even if you have a manufacturing facility, obviously those people can't, but the office staff might be able to do more so. We've also seen a lot with how offices are going to be configured. We found people, they're going to do things like work with different, like Joe and Sally come in on Monday and Friday, and Bill and Bobby come in on Thursday and Tuesday, or over the weekend. So there are a lot of different things that we're helping them alter. It's not just the physical piece, though, that we work with. It's the cultural piece. It's the people piece that is so critical in how we're all together. Sort of like 9/11, I'll say sort of, because that was kind of there. It really is, all of a sudden, we're all in this together. And we've been using that acronym because not acronym, that saying, because we really are all in it together. And how we can help companies, and have been helping companies, pivot into a virtual reality is just as effective, can be just effective. And we found it to be that it's really also the culture piece that are important. Tom, did you want to say anything else around that?
Evie, that's a great description of what it is that we're looking to move forward with. And some of the tools that we're investigating are VR tools, virtual reality, augmented reality, which is now called XR. And we believe that that initial movement towards that, as we've discussed with people, are, if there was a trend before COVID hit, then this will accelerate those trends. And XR, VR, AR is absolutely a tool that can provide us with a huge number of opportunities to educate people, not just individually, but in a group, and have them feel more comfortable of being in a group in a virtual environment than just a presentation like today, which is great, but there needs to be more engagement as we move along. And that's how we're looking to create that.
And one last thing I'd like to add to that is, because when we do say people we work with or businesses, it's not because it's our opinion. I mean, we do business advisory, as you know, but it's really because we want you to understand is that because of our groups and working with all these different types of businesses, we get to see and have our perspective, a wider scope perspective. So I just want to express that it's not just our opinion, it's things that we have seen in the workplace with people we work with.
Well, that actually ties in really nicely to the last question that we have. From those companies and businesses that you've been in communication with, with prior experience and now, what are the biggest takeaways from those companies that have effectively handled, a reaction to the pandemic and are able to keep going forward?
Tom, I think I'm gonna start with this one, if that's okay. I think the biggest thing that we have seen is communication. So that sounds so basic, doesn't it? Communication is so key. We have seen it work really well where companies feel comfortable. They understand where the leadership is going. The leader is there to support them. We've also seen the other side where leaders are not communicating and they are kind of doing what they normally do, which is maybe not communicating. But the biggest piece I could offer is to communicate. Even if it's not good news, it's important to communicate with your staff, with your peers, even with your families about what's been going on and what you're feeling and what you see as a leader, what you see is going to happen. And maybe you don't know. And that's also critical to say, because you know what? Most of us, we don't really know what to do with that. We don't know what's really happening. We're all working to struggle to figure out what would be the best step and how we can work together. So I think communication is the biggest key, and you cannot over communicate in this kind of environment and this ecosystem. I just feel really strongly about that, and we've seen it, as I said, work really well and also not work, and to see the repercussions of that.
I'll piggyback on just that one piece and then one other idea, and really appreciate the opportunity. The piggyback on this is that without that communication, we made up a term. Your employees, your peers, they'll awfulize what's going on. They'll in the vacuum of non-communication, generally what people think isn't necessarily good news. So I think it's important that is just reinforces the point that Evie made about how to communicate. And I think the second one is just what we presented here today. The takeaway is, how do I focus, how do I prioritize, and how do I execute? Because the standard way of focusing was the day-to-day operations as it moved along. And if some urgency came up, very much like the urgencies quadrants that have been put together, people would handle what was urgent, maybe not necessarily important. We really can't afford that way of operating any longer, or else the the business will go out of business. So it's imperative to have a tool that allows you to look at focusing on what's most important, prioritizing those activities that are most important, and then executing against those and iterating that monthly. Right now, we're meeting with our top level clients on a weekly basis to have conversations about what they need to do because of the necessity to iterate this as more effectively than they have been in the past. So that's those are the two key takeaways, I think, Emily.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tom and Evie. We really appreciate you sharing this information today and for putting it into terms that I think are digestible for people at all levels of an organization. So just a few reminders, we will have this recording available, the webinar available, by recording this afternoon. So please feel free to share this across your teams. This could be a really good starting point for an internal conversation at your own organization. In addition, I will share copies of the tools that Tom and Evie had used, the Business Model Canvas, Porter's 5 Forces, as well as the basic SWOT form. And then for anybody that is interested in having a follow-up conversation with Tom and Evie, with IMEC, we want to help to make sure that you are on track to move into that new beginning and get out of that transition phase. We want to get everybody in a solid footing as we keep moving forward into whatever that next step ends up being, to be determined. We thank you again for being with us and look forward to your feedback on the webinar evaluation. Also want to draw your attention to our upcoming May webinars. We do still have a full slate of sessions coming up for the rest of the month, and are in the process right now of getting our June webinar schedule pulled together as well. So lots of sessions coming up, and hope that you can continue to join us at those. So on behalf of IMEC and Breakthrough Results, thank you so much for being with us today and all that you're doing to keep your company and your community safe during this time. Thank you and have a great afternoon.